Welcome to Let's Talk Business Phoenix, the Greater Phoenix Chamber's podcast. I'm your host, Todd Sanders, President and CEO of the Greater Phoenix Chamber. Each week, we tackle key issues affecting businesses, the community, and state, aiming to drive growth and overcome challenges while uniting community leaders to move Phoenix forward.
Let's Talk Business Phoenix was produced in partnership with Ideas Collide, an agency offering a full suite of custom marketing solutions for your brand's unique challenges. Make a connection at ideascollide.com.
Welcome back to the podcast. We have a really great show for you today. We're honored to have the Chief Judge of the Arizona Court of Appeals, Judge Dave Goss. Thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here. Lovely, cool day in the Valley, which is something we've been waiting for. So
absolutely. It is a nice Rubicon to cross.
Yes.
Well, I think a lot of folks that are watching probably know you or know of you, but some don't. So maybe a little bit about yourself, and then more importantly, something about you that we wouldn't know from your bio that makes you interesting.
Oh my.
And I know there's a lot. So
books could be written, but that's true of all of us, isn't
yes,
it?
It's true.
No, first, I doubt that many people really do realize who I am, because the Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals, though in a very important role, is not one that's highly publicized or well known. So I'm Dave Goss. I've been in Arizona now for almost 40 years. And have had a wonderful experience. I went to law school here, learned how much Arizona has to offer, and I'm so glad I stayed.
Did you want to care to say what law school?
I'm just going to say their lawyers are very friendly. They make great neighbors. They go to the Mr. Rogers School, and then there's ASU.
Okay.
So I went to ASU.
I guess we know now.
But I really did. The opportunities that Arizona presents are amazing. I grew up in Pennsylvania, in the Appalachian part of it, not as many opportunities. And even for, anywhere, the history is so long there. Here you can come and really invent yourself and become what you want. So it was an opportunity. And along the way, I ended up working with the likes of you.
Yes. I absolutely, those are some good days. And you're right, it's a good place to be new, and it's hard to do that in places like Chicago or New York.
It's almost impossible. And I'll tell you, by way of an analogy to what my mother went through, she moved out here when she was older. And she moved to Prescott. And her description of it was, back there, she was always Betty this, or Betty the child, Betty the teacher, Betty the widow, Betty the wife, Betty teacher, whatever. And when she got here, she could just be Betty. And just that freedom to say, okay, this is what I want to do and this is how I want to get there. And Arizona opens those doors.
Absolutely. Just reinvent yourself,
yes.
Which is, and then get to work, right? People accept that.
I have worked a lot.
Yes, you have. So before we get into that, something about you that we wouldn't necessarily know from your formal bios and we can find on the internet.
Well, Scarlett Johansson hung out at my house one evening for a party. So.
Okay. You want to elaborate?
Nope.
Okay.
Just ScarJo and I hung out.
All right.
I'll tell you that I was told to try out for the Diamondbacks once. You may have been in the room when that happened.
I don't remember.
When they won the World Series. And Joe Garagiola Jr. was throwing pens around.
Oh, yes.
And he threw a pen to Michael Mandel, and I reached out and snagged it away from him, and he said, you should try out for the Diamondbacks. That is my claim to fame.
That and Scarlett Johansson.
And ScarJo.
I like it. That's very good, and we'll just make up whatever conversations happen in our mind. And you mentioned the fact that we got to work together. That was such I thought, a tremendous time. It's such a formative time in our careers. Maybe talk a little bit about that experience.
Well, I was working at the legislature. Yeah. You were fairly new there.
Yes.
And I was brand new when I started. We worked on the same committee. What was it, Energy?
I think it was, yes.
Energy something.
Energy.
We had T-shirts made.
Yeah, we did.
The nice part is you were working for one group at the legislature. I was working for another group, and partisan.
Yeah.
And what I found is we were able to work together very well, and everybody on staff did. That there is more collegiality in even that organization than people realize, that there is more work together, that we identify areas of agreement so much more than disagreement. It's just the disagreements are the ones that get highlighted. But I thought it was a wonderful experience. I learned so much from that time and from you.
No, we did. And to your point, I mean, we needed to work together to get things done. And, the chair of the committee would say, get together with Dave. let's work through this issue. And we did have different camps, but I think that is an important thing to remind folks that you can get things done.
And it's the only way that things do get done.
You bet. Thinking about sort of the Court of Appeals, I think for a lot of folks, it's a little bit of an abstract. Maybe talk to us a little bit about the Court of Appeals and its function and your role.
Sure. The Court of Appeals is the court of right for almost every appeal that people have in the state of Arizona. The only exception would be capital cases. If a defendant is sentenced to death, that person has a right to appeal directly to the Supreme Court. But all other appeals come to us unless they are purposely bypassed us. For example, we just finished an election. Some election law cases, though they land in my court, will get transferred because they need finality sooner. But our court hears all the direct appeals of right and basically resolves almost all of them, and they never go any further. So while the Superior Court rarely gets appealed, when they get appealed and come to our court, that's usually the last word.
It doesn't move forward to the Supreme Court.
They don't. People will petition for review. The Supreme Court has discretionary review, and they'll take 50, 70 cases a year. But that's of the well over 1,000 that we have resolved.
Okay.
And most of those are affirmed. So our court stands as the last appellate word in almost all the cases that are out there that get appealed.
And so it's a pretty significant caseload based on what you've just said.
It is. We handle family, civil, criminal, juvenile. Maricopa County, the Division I, which I'm responsible for, is responsible for the tax court, all unemployment benefit appeals, and workers' compensation appeals. So that is the bulk of all the litigation in the state lands in my court.
So very relevant for the business community.
Highly relevant. And one of the things we look at is how can we serve not just the business community, but all the communities better.
Absolutely.
Juvenile court is one that we're focused on right now because of some disclosure problems that have occurred. So, we just have to work through it. And our goal is to make sure that our system works, that people understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and that ultimately we give everybody a fair opportunity to be heard.
So we're also going to be honored to have the Chief Justice on as well. One of the questions I'm going to have for her is the sort of the state of judiciary. From your perspective, state of the judiciary in Arizona.
I think the challenge is that public perception is down, and that's across the board in almost every kind of public role. And it's across professions too. The view of a lot of people are lower right now, and the courts have suffered. State courts have suffered a little bit less than the federal courts, but they still have suffered. I'm in agreement with the Chief Justice. I think we need to do a better job of telling our story so that people know what we do and why we do it and how we do it. We can't be transparent in that people can't sit in on our discussions. But we can be transparent in explaining what our decisions are, making sure people know what we based our decisions on. And if we do that and tell that story better, I think we're better off. We have to show people that we're not politicians in the classic sense. That difference between walking across the mall over at the Capitol and walking down the hall at the court. And they're very different experiences if you want, I can tease that out for you just a little bit. Sure, please. I arranged for judges to do Judges' Day at the Capitol. I had worked at the Capitol for a number of years, 7 sessions, as we call it.
That's 49 years in normal people's lives.
Yes, it is, in people's lives. And I also worked at the AGs, working at the legislature for another session. Down there, we are listening to the public. We are talking to the public. The public is stopping us no matter where we are. You could be standing in the restroom and the lobbyist may start to talk to you because that's just, that's their opportunity. Standing in the lunch line, all sorts of places. And that's because we need to know what the public want, because we're establishing laws that apply generally to the population.
And direct representation.
And it's a real opportunity. Judges don't understand that in a lot of ways, because when I got them to go over there, they were astonished at 15-minute meetings where they'd hear from like 6 different people who had 6 different points of view on the same thing. And then they thought they were done. And then I used the walking across the mall. They start to walk across the mall and 2 more people stop the lobby or the legislator to tell their story. At the court, we're deciding the case between 2 litigants. And that's why our job is different. That's why we need to be careful what we're doing. Because I'm not here to tell the whole state what the law should be. Though I may set precedent, I'm really just resolving the case before me. And I have to be careful, and I'm not talking to other people. I'm not getting phone calls on the side. I'm not having lawyers come in and pitch to me outside of it. Everybody has a full and fair opportunity to be heard. They're all heard the same amount, and we decide the cases. And I think people need to understand that we are not that political branch. We really are focused on the parties before us.
And so given that we live in a soundbite world, and this is, there's a lot of technicality to this, how do you get the word out to people about the differences and the nuance?
That is a struggle. And I'm on a rule of law committee that the State Bar has formed, an access to justice committee that's been formed to try and figure that out. My take on it is this. I don't want you to take this the wrong way. But you and I are old. We're not kids nowadays. There was a time when we knew how to get the word out. But how to get the word out to the current generation and some other folks, I think we need to be talking to them to tell us how to do it. I keep advocating on these different committees, we need to get some young people in. An example that I'm using is I've got some materials that we're working on for self-represented litigants. We have a program for the Commission on Diversity, Equality, and Justice, and we're trying to name this program we do called Legal Futures, which is to get students and young people interested in the law and maybe being on the bench. And they're coming up with the name, and I'm like, could we maybe shop this to the kids we're trying to sell it to? Because I may buy it, but that doesn't mean they're going to. So that's, from my perspective, we have to figure out how to talk to the kids and the younger generation. And the only way we do that is to talk with them first.
Not at them.
Not at them, because then we're just telling them, we're giving them the message that we think works, and we have no idea whether it's going to sell with them.
So you talked about programs that, different avenues for justice, and I think you've done a lot in the system in your career as a judge to ensure, for instance, access to justice for underserved communities. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of those efforts and why they're important to you?
They're critically important because that is how the community starts to have trust in our system. If they don't have the ability to get into court and to see how it works. When you have, for example, jurors, and I presided over many jury trials, jurors see a trial once and they are engaged and they go, wow, I had no idea that this is how it works. I didn't realize how important it was. And so it's getting that word out and getting people engaged in what we're doing. So I try and do that as much as I can. We have our outreach program to do connecting with the communities, which is going out and actually doing oral argument in a school around the state. We have CLE Roadshow, which takes programs out. I'm developing an appeal in a box, which sounds funny, but it's true. It's an appeal in a box, and we're going to record it here in the next week or so. We will have sign language interpreter on it so the students can watch it. So what I'm planning is at the end, I'm going to be able to show the students the briefs and what the parties argued. I'm going to be able to show students the argument, and then I'm going to be able to show them the decision the judge has reached. And whether our whole court can go or just one judge, or they need somebody to do it remotely because there's nobody in the area who can do it. We've reached out to tribal nations and have done stuff like this. I, in an hour and a half, can show them how an appeal works in an interesting setting and really be able to do that. So that's the kind of thing that I'm trying to develop. The other thing is self-represented litigants.
Okay.
40% of our cases are self-represented on appeal these days.
Well, there's that old saying about if you're your own client in a court of law,
you have
not such a good thing. Correct, yeah.
Yeah, it's true. That is a challenge, but because so many people can't afford a lawyer. And while we've done things, and the chief has really done some wonderful things when you talk to Chief Justice Timmer on providing services for folks, it hasn't reached the appellate level. So people are either handling it on their own or they have to pay a lawyer. Most of them can't. So with 40% of the cases, I looked at a manual that we had created, and it's over 100 pages long. And as a lawyer and a chief judge, I would be hesitant to handle an appeal after reading it. Yeah. It has a chart on it that is something out of the New York Times crossword page for like the holiday. And so what we're doing is actually rewriting them. We're putting them in plain English. We're adopting simplified forms. So the people shouldn't be afraid to do it, but we need to give them the tools.
Yeah, and how will those be made available?
We're going to have them online.
Okay.
We're going to have a manual itself. We'll also have module-based programs. It will be by case type. So if you say, oh, I'm in a family law case or a civil case, you'll open up the family law case or the civil case. If you're a prisoner who's looking at a post-conviction relief, we're going to have a program for them so that they can do it, because many of them are doing their self-represented. Sometimes they win. Sometimes they have a valid point. So it'll be online. It'll be in English and Spanish. It'll have videos, because people learn differently. Some people will learn from reading it. Some people will learn from seeing it online, reading it. Some people will learn from watching the video. So it should be readily available, and we're working with the Superior Court, which is exciting, to have their resource center and their folks there be able to help folks with filing the notice of appeal and then helping them walk through this simplified process.
And it sort of covers the gamut, like small claims, all of that. I guess small claims is always going to be self-represented.
But small claims are interesting.
Yeah.
You bring up, we do get them, but they come to us by way of a special action from the Superior Court, but they do eventually make their way to us. But yeah, right now we're focused on the biggies.
Okay.
Family, criminal, civil, unemployment benefits, because they're almost always unrepresented, workers' comp, and post-conviction relief. We will be doing more, but if we get those basics, we cover almost all of our appeals.
It's significant if you don't have the resources to have that, at least to have something to hold on to and to get you through it.
And know that what's nice for us is we get them and we can't understand what they're saying, because they're trying to meet a standard that they can't meet. And that's not their fault. I'm not putting them down, but it's the legal world.
Like if you had to do engineering work, it'd be very difficult.
Yes, you would not want to build a house that I designed. I would 100% agree.
Would not be good.
And so, yeah, it's to walk them through. And then if we understand what they're asking for, we can figure out the rest of it. And we do have a pro bono program. And so for cases that really merit it, we can go out and ask somebody to see if we don't go directly. We have a representative in the community, Eric Frazier, and he goes out and finds people to represent them.
Awesome. Talking about sort of the complexity of the system, one of the things I heard from probably everybody I talked to was, what do we do with all these judges on the ballot? And for me, it was easy. Well, I know a few of them, right? Some of you don't.
I was not on the ballot this time, so you don't even have to tell me whether you voted for me.
There you go. But there was also a question on the ballot about whether or not we should do away with retention. Obviously, people are paying attention. And there was a pretty significant voice on that.
Very significant.
Maybe talk to us a little bit about that.
I will, and this is one of the areas we can talk about. And so I did not support that measure from the beginning. There are good things in it. And you and I have talked about changing some of these things. Retention elections are scary for judges. We put our name on the ballot, and sometimes people lose those for the wrong reason. But generally speaking, that's not the case. So I think the ballot measure started with legitimate reasons, and we used to call them Christmas trees.
Yes.
It was a pretty tree. There were some lights on it that may have done some good things, and then a lot of people hung ornaments on it, and it just fell under its own
amendments, right, to a bill. We used to Christmas tree a bill, yes.
And it became a Christmas tree. So what I would like to do is see some change. What I would propose is the Constitution says whoever the governor is, doesn't matter what party, they have to replace that person with someone of the same party that person is. Now, it only applies if you lose your retention, not to regular retirements. Right. And that person has to have been a member of that party from before the previous general election. So you can't game the system. Change my party today and I can get appointed. And I know that happens. It's well documented in other settings. But that way, the heat, let's get rid of this person and we can get somebody of some sort of different perspective in, goes away. That seems to drive a lot of the efforts to remove people. I just want to say this, though. I don't really know judges that rule based on maybe what their political perspective is.
Correct.
I've been in both worlds, and we reach a lot of consensus. If you look, we have very few dissents. It's not because we're all just caving. It's because we write our decisions narrowly, so when we disagree, if we can avoid that issue and resolve it without it, we don't. So I have a lot of faith in our judiciary. I have confidence in them. But I think that takes the desire, that push to vote these people out because. And then
you sort of you sidestep that issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to go back to education a little bit. I know my son graduated high school and went to college with sort of a vague idea of what it is he wanted to do. He did think about law for a while. When you're talking to students, probably in the high school realm. What do you tell them about going into a legal career and maybe your experience and how you came into this career?
Well, I tell them, one, it's incredibly important. And if it's something that they want to do and enjoy, they should do it. My experience was I was talked out of going into the law by my father. He said, lawyers are a dime a dozen. He wanted me to he said I could make a good grocery store manager. And I think I would have made a great grocery store manager.
What would make you a good grocery store? I want to know here.
Well, I worked in a grocery store for one.
So you had experience.
I had experience. And I will tell you, I still go into the grocery store. And apparently I smile too much, but you know that. Because I am always being asked, where do I find? I mean, people just assume I am working at the grocery store.
The Charmin guy.
Yeah, I'm that guy. But I tell them how important it is that if that's what they want to do, to work at it, to work out on coming up with a plan. Because I didn't have a family that was going to pay for me to go. I had to pay for my own college, and law school was going to be on my own. And so I talked to them about how to plan, that you can do this. And it may take you a few years longer. But as long as you plan, and show them that there are people who are willing to work with them, and tell them how important it is. One of the things and I could have been talked out of this at any stage, with the right people. And my father did talk me out of it for about 7 years because he kept saying, no, lawyers are a dime a dozen. And so I think it's important that they live, keep that dream in mind and not let someone else talk them out of it. The example I use is applying for the bench, and I easily could have talked myself out of applying for the bench, just to jump into something a little different. Yeah. I'm openly gay. I went to law school in the early 90s. There were no gay judges, at least not openly. The idea of it was foreign, and it was still illegal. We had the laws in Arizona, which we called the archaic laws. The Supreme Court had said we could enforce them. And so the way I explain it is I could have easily written myself out of my own life story. And I always tell them, do not write yourself out of your own life story. Don't wait for somebody to tell you it's time. It's time when you decide it's ready. And that's what I want to get that message out to kids. If you want to go to law school, you can get there. No one's going to tell you it's going to be easy. No one's going to hand it to you on a silver platter, but you can get there and you can make a difference. You can change the world for a better place. And so that's what I try and communicate with them.
Yeah, well, thankfully you didn't listen to Dad or the 90s.
That's right. I moved on.
Well, and I remember when you were going to make the switch, that was a big deal to go from sort of that legislative world into the judicial world, and it had to be daunting.
It was, and people were not sure that it was the right thing to do or the right time. So I got a lot of, is this the right time? From a lot of people. And that's why I always come back to it's the right time when it's the time for you.
You bet.
If we wait for it to be someone else's time, we're never going to do anything.
You bet. So obviously, this was a big career change for you going into the judiciary. What was the biggest surprise for you? What was the most unexpected part of being in the judiciary?
How hard it is to have people call me by my first name. Nobody, and my understanding from the stories is Sandra Day O'Connor, and I don't remember her ever doing this to me, but when she'd meet people, she'd say, hi, I'm Sandy.
Yeah.
And nobody would call her Justice Sandy. It was always Justice O'Connor. I would tell you every judge runs into that. And why that matters to me is titles put up barriers. They have to be there in the courtroom. So please, Todd, if you come into my courtroom, don't say Dave. We've been there before. We know this. You have to refer to me as Judge Goss. It's part of the setting.
Correct.
In that setting. But socially, when I'm sitting across the table from a student who's trying to figure out what they want to do, that's a barrier I don't want there. So I try and break down the barriers. But the barriers the court puts up is a challenge. And I work every day to have people not use those in that way, because I think it prevents us from being able to really share what we need to share.
It's an interesting perspective, and you're right. I had the opportunity to meet the justice, and certainly would never call her Sam, not in a million years, right? And so, yeah, it's true, and I could see where there's those two sides, and people need to sort of understand what those look like, and that you're actually a person. And
like a nurse in an operating room says, yes, doctor.
Right.
But outside of that,
sure,
there's no reason to be saying doctor at that point. Plus, it gets very confusing. There are 160 people with the first name Judge in Maricopa County. That's, who are you talking to?
It starts to get confusing. Absolutely.
Although, didn't we used to use that with representatives?
We did. Oh, still, yes.
It's like, okay, I'm drawing a blank. It's yes, Mr. Representative.
Well, there's still some former lawmakers that I don't think I can call them by their first name. It's just I still can't.
Yeah.
It's just a mental block, or a governor, for instance. That's another one.
I clerked for Ruth McGregor.
Don't have that. Correct. Yes.
A long time to not call her judge or justice or chief.
Correct. Yes, that would be very difficult.
It was.
Well, thank you for spending so much time with us. Thank you for what you do for our state, and within and outside of the judicial system. It's tremendous. Before you go, though, we're going to do a quick lightning round with you.
Oh my! I didn't know about this.
I think you kind of already gave us one answer, but the first one is, what was your first job?
I actually delivered newspapers.
Oh, okay.
And Sunday newspapers with a wagon in Pennsylvania. Had to strap the wagon to the back of my bicycle and ride around, and that's when you did collections and everything.
So what did you learn?
That it's hard work. And truly, I learned how to say, look, I need money. I know but you learn how to say, look, this is a business, and if you don't pay me, I still have to pay them. And so I learned how to run a little business and make sure that I was profitable.
And daunting as a kid, right?
It is.
First concert?
Adam Ant.
Oh, that's a good one. All right, nice. Since we are getting close to the end of the year, what's going to be your New Year's resolution?
Every year I do the same little poem.
Yeah.
And it's about really wishing everybody what's best for them, good health, and really wishing for them their dreams. And I'll tell you the story is I had 3 people I worked with. My first job as a judge, and they had 3 different birthstones, so I got them each a ring with those birthstones in, and then I took what those birthstones stand for: strength, good health, things like that. And I turned them into that. So every year I wish that for everybody and end it with wishing you your dreams.
Well, I can't think of a better way to end this than with that. And
I wish you your dreams, man. I think you're living some of them.
Thank you. You bet, my friend. Thank you for joining us, and we'd love to have you back.
Happy to be.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for watching this episode of Let's Talk Business Phoenix. Please take a moment to tap the follow or subscribe button for more great podcast episodes to help your business thrive.